Montana Territory, 1876. Daniel Lawson stood on the train platform of Silver Creek, his hat in his hands, watching the black iron beast huff and chug its way into the station. The mid-April air carried a bite, but the warming sun promised the coming of spring to the rugged valley he called home. At 25, Daniel had already carved out a respectable ranch 10 miles outside town. 500 acres, a sturdy two-story house, and enough cattle to build something worth passing down someday. If only there were someone to pass it down to. Last call for disembarking, the conductor shouted as the train wheezed to a stop. Daniel squared his shoulders and smoothed down his freshly pressed shirt. Just get through today, he muttered to himself. A business arrangement, nothing more. He had repeated this to himself for weeks since mailing his response to the advertisement. Men didn't survive the Montana frontier by chasing romantic notions. Love was a luxury for people back east, not for those scratching survival from unforgiving land. The ranch needed a woman's touch, someone to cook, keep house, perhaps bear children someday. That was all. Practical considerations. Hearts had nothing to do with it. Only a handful of passengers stepped onto the wooden platform. Daniel scanned each face, looking for the woman who would become his wife by sundown. The justice of the peace was already waiting in town. Then he saw her. Julia Bennett stepped carefully down from the train car, one gloved hand clutching a small leather valise, the other holding her dark blue traveling dress above her ankles. At 20 years old, she was younger than he expected, with honey blonde hair pinned beneath a modest hat. Even from a distance, Daniel could see she was beautiful. High cheekbones, full lips, a delicate nose. But as she turned, searching the platform with wary eyes, the left side of her face caught the sunlight, revealing a thin scar that traced from temple to jaw. Something in Daniel's chest tightened. His letter had specifically requested an unmarred woman of good standing. This wasn't what he'd agreed to. Julia's gaze found his, recognition flickering as she saw the only young man standing alone on the platform. He watched her shoulders straighten, chin lifting slightly, as if preparing for battle. She approached with measured steps. "Mr. Lawson?" Her voice carried a slight Eastern accent, refined but hesitant. Daniel nodded, unable to look away from the scar. Up close, he could see it wasn't the only one. A smaller mark cut across her right eyebrow, partially hidden by a carefully arranged curl. "I'm Julia Bennett." She extended her hand formally, then faltered when he didn't immediately take it. Her eyes, a striking shade of blue, clouded with understanding. "I see. The photographs I sent didn't show these." Her fingers brushed her cheek briefly before dropping back to her side. Daniel realized he was staring and cleared his throat. "Miss Bennett, welcome to Silver Creek." He finally took her hand, noting how small it felt in his. "I have the wagon just over there." They walked in silence to where his wagon waited, a handsome pair of bay horses stomping impatiently in their harnesses. Daniel loaded her trunk and valise, then offered his hand to help her up to the seat. When she was settled, he climbed up beside her, leaving a proper distance between them. "It's quite beautiful here," Julia offered as they pulled away from town, the mountains rising majestic against the sky. "It's hard country," Daniel replied, more curtly than he intended. "Winter kills the weak. Summer drought can ruin a man. Wolves take calves. Indians sometimes raid outlying homesteads." He glanced at her profile. "This isn't Boston, Miss Bennett." "Philadelphia," she corrected quietly. "And I'm no stranger to hardship, Mr. Lawson." Daniel flicked the reins. The arrangement was for a wife without complications. Your letter said nothing of. He couldn't bring himself to say it. "My scars." Julia finished for him, staring straight ahead. "Yes, I know what your advertisement requested. I also know that men who want unmarred mail-order brides rarely care about the woman herself." Her voice held no accusation, only weary knowledge. "I needed to leave Philadelphia. Your offer seemed kind." "Kind?" Daniel nearly laughed. "I need a wife to cook, clean, and help with the ranch. There's nothing kind about it. You mentioned wanting children someday. You wrote about building something that would last. That's more than most men put in their advertisements." Julia's hands tightened in her lap. "If my appearance troubles you so greatly, I understand. You can leave me in town, and I'll find passage elsewhere." Daniel said nothing for nearly a mile, the only sounds the creak of the wagon and the steady clop of hooves. The woman beside him sat ramrod straight, dignity intact despite what must have been crushing disappointment. As they crested a hill overlooking his property, the whitewashed house gleaming in the distance, cattle dotting the green valley floor, Daniel finally spoke. "What happened to you?" Julia's breath caught. "Does it matter? If we're to be married by sundown, I reckon it might." She was quiet, so long Daniel thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible above the wagon's rumble. "My father died when I was 16. My mother remarried. My stepfather." She paused. "He had expectations of what a daughter should be. When I failed to meet them, he believed physical correction was his right." Daniel's hands tightened on the reins. "And your mother?" Looked away. "Said I provoked him." Julia's voice was matter-of-fact, as if discussing the weather. "The last time, he used his belt buckle. When I woke in the doctor's care, I decided I would rather face the unknown west than spend another day in that house." They were approaching the ranch now. Daniel could see his foreman, Mike, watching their arrival from the corral. "Miss Bennett," Daniel said, pulling the wagon to a stop before they reached the house. "I won't pretend I'm not disappointed that you weren't honest in your letters." Julia's face remained composed, though her eyes betrayed her hurt. "But I think perhaps you should know something about me as well." He turned to face her fully. "My father was a mean drunk who used his fists on anything that displeased him. My mother, me, even our dogs. When I was 14, he beat my mother so badly she lost the baby she was carrying. A week later, he rode off during a snowstorm and never came back." Daniel took a deep breath. "I swore then that violence would never be part of my home." He nodded toward her scars. "Those marks tell me what happened to you, but they don't tell me who you are. That's what matters on the frontier, who you are when life tries to break you." Julia's eyes glistened. "And who am I, Mr. Lawson? You've known me less than an hour." Daniel studied her for a long moment. "Someone brave enough to travel 2,000 miles to marry a stranger. Someone who sits with perfect posture despite what must be bone-deep weariness." His voice softened. "Someone whose past ends here, if she wants it to." A single tear spilled down Julia's cheek, tracing the line of her scar. "And if the justice of the peace asks about these?" Her fingers touched her face. Daniel reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed away the tear with his thumb. "Then I'll tell him my wife came to me already carrying battle wounds, and that makes her exactly the kind of woman who can survive Montana." Julia's smile, small and tentative but genuine, was the first Daniel had seen from her. Something unexpected and warm bloomed in his chest. "Come on," he said, picking up the reins. "Let's go home. We can decide about the justice of the peace after you've had a proper meal and seen the place." The house was larger than Julia had expected, 6 rooms downstairs and 4 above, built solidly of pine with a stone chimney. Inside, she found it clean but barren, lacking any feminine touches that would transform a structure into a home. The previous owner built it for his family, Daniel explained as he showed her through the rooms. But his wife took ill their second winter. After she passed, he couldn't bear to stay. "It's a beautiful house," Julia said, running her hand along a carved banister. "It just needs some life breathed back into it." That evening, after a simple supper that Daniel prepared, they sat at the kitchen table with cooling cups of coffee between them. "We should discuss our arrangement," Daniel said carefully. "I meant what I said about your past ending here, but I want to be clear about expectations." Julia nodded, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. "You need a wife to help with the ranch, to cook and keep house. And eventually children." "Yes." Daniel cleared his throat. "But I don't expect, that is, the marriage bed." His face flushed. "Would be part of a proper marriage," Julia finished softly. "I understand the obligation." Daniel's eyes met hers, troubled. "I don't want obligation from you, Miss Bennett. I want a partnership that works for both of us." He hesitated. "I propose we marry as planned, but we take time to know each other first. You'll have your own room upstairs for as long as you wish it." Relief and something like disappointment mingled in Julia's chest. "That's very considerate." "It's practical," Daniel insisted. "The ranch needs a woman's touch, but we're strangers to each other. Trust has to be earned out here." That night, after the justice of the peace had performed the simple ceremony in the parlor with only Daniel's foreman Mike and housekeeper Mrs. Porter as witnesses, Julia lay awake in the bedroom that was now hers. She traced the scar on her face in the darkness, remembering the way Daniel had looked at it, not with disgust, but with recognition. as if he understood that some wounds changed more than just flesh. "Your past ends here," he had said. Julia wasn't sure if such a thing was possible, but for the first time in years, she allowed herself to hope. Spring melted into summer, and with it came a fragile rhythm to their shared life. Julia took to ranch work with determination if not skill, learning to gather eggs without getting pecked, to make soap from rendered fat, to bake bread in the temperamental oven. Daniel was patient with her mistakes, gently correcting rather than criticizing. They still slept in separate rooms, their marriage unconsummated but gradually growing in small intimacies. His hand at her back when they walked to the barn, her fingers brushing his when passing the coffee pot. Conversations that stretched later into the evening as they discovered shared interests in books and music. One July afternoon, Julia was hanging laundry when she noticed riders approaching, 3 men she didn't recognize. Daniel was out checking the north pasture with Mike, and Mrs. Porter had gone to town for supplies. Julia hurried inside, retrieved the shotgun Daniel had taught her to use, and returned to the porch. She didn't point the weapon at the approaching men, but kept it visible across her lap as she sat in the rocking chair. "Afternoon, ma'am," the lead rider called as they drew near. All 3 were trail-worn and rough-looking, with several days' growth of beard. "We're looking for work. Heard Lawson Ranch might be hiring." "Mr. Lawson isn't here at present," Julia replied evenly, her hand steady on the shotgun. "But he'll return before sunset if you'd care to water your horses at the trough while you wait." The men exchanged glances. "Mighty hospitable of you, ma'am," the lead rider said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Don't believe we've met. You must be Lawson's wife." "I am." Julia didn't offer more. The men dismounted, leading their horses to the water trough. Julia remained on the porch, watching as they loosened cinches and spoke in low voices. Something about their manner set her nerves on edge. "You got any coffee brewing, Mrs. Lawson?" the youngest of the 3 called. "Been riding since dawn." "I'm afraid not," Julia replied. "But you're welcome to rest in the shade of the barn until my husband returns." Instead, the 3 men approached the house. Julia's grip tightened on the shotgun. "That's far enough, gentlemen," she said when they reached the bottom of the porch steps. The lead rider, a man with a weathered face and cold gray eyes, smiled again. "Now, is that any way to treat tired travelers? We just want a place to sit, and maybe something cool to drink. And I've offered you the shade of the barn and the water trough," Julia countered, rising to her feet. The shotgun now pointed at the ground, but her meaning was clear. "My husband doesn't take kindly to uninvited guests approaching the house when he's away." The youngest man snickered. "Feisty little thing, ain't she, Jake?" The leader, Jake, studied Julia's face, his gaze lingering on her scar. "Got some spirit, that's certain. Wonder if Lawson knows what he married." Julia's blood ran cold at his tone. These weren't men looking for honest work. "I believe my wife asked you to wait by the barn." All 4 turned to see Daniel riding in from the east field, rifle in hand. Mike flanked him, similarly armed. Jake raised his hands in a placating gesture. "No offense meant, Lawson. Just looking for work and maybe a meal." Daniel dismounted, his expression hard. "We're not hiring. Town's 5 miles south if you're looking for a meal." The tension stretched between them like a bowstring pulled taut. Julia remained on the porch, shotgun ready. "Might be we'll head that way then," Jake finally said. "Just thought I'd pay respects to an old friend. Been what, 5 years since Dodge City?" Daniel's face betrayed nothing. "I don't recall making friends in Dodge." "No? Strange. Man remembers who saved his neck in a card game gone bad." Jake's smile turned ugly. "Or maybe you just want to forget that part of your life now that you've got this nice, spread, and pretty wife." Julia watched Daniel's jaw tighten, saw the brief flicker of something like shame cross his features. "Whatever you think you know about me," Daniel said evenly, "it has no place here. Mount up and move on." The 3 men returned to their horses, Jake's cold eyes never leaving Daniel. "We'll be in town a spell. Maybe we'll talk more when the lady's not listening." They rode out, dust billowing behind them. Daniel watched until they disappeared over the ridge, then turned to Julia, his expression unreadable. "Are you all right?" Julia nodded, lowering the shotgun. "Who were they?" Daniel handed his rifle to Mike. "Trouble from a past I thought I'd left behind." He ran a hand through his hair. "I need to ride to town, make sure the sheriff knows they're around." "Daniel." Julia caught his arm as he turned to remount. What did he mean about Dodge City? His eyes met hers, troubled and distant. Nothing that matters now. But that night, after returning from town, Daniel sat heavily on the porch steps beside Julia. For long minutes, he said nothing, just stared out at the darkening land. I wasn't always the man you know, he finally said, voice low. After my father disappeared, I was angry. Took to drinking, gambling, looking for fights. His hands clasped together, knuckles white. Rode with some rough men for a few years. Did things I'm not proud of. Julia waited, saying nothing. Jake McCleary ran with a gang that robbed stagecoaches, small banks. I never joined them in that, but I drank with them, played cards with them. He glanced at her, gauging her reaction. One night in Dodge, a man accused Jake of cheating. Drew on him. I knocked the gun aside before he could fire, saved Jake's worthless hide. And now he's here, Julia said softly. Daniel nodded. He'll want me to help with whatever they're planning. Or he'll try to use what he knows about my past to cause trouble. Julia reached for his hand, her fingers cool against his skin. Your past ends here too, Daniel. Isn't that what you told me? His eyes, dark with worry, searched her face. Some pasts don't let go so easily. Then we faced them together. Julia's voice held a certainty she hadn't known she possessed. Whatever comes, we face it together. That night, when Daniel walked her to her bedroom door, as had become their custom, Julia made a decision. Instead of bidding him good night, she took his hand and led him inside. In the soft glow of the lamp, she untied the ribbon at her throat, letting her hair fall loose around her shoulders. Julia, Daniel breathed, his eyes never leaving her face. Are you certain? She answered by stepping into his arms, her lips finding his in a kiss that began tentative but quickly deepened with months of restrained longing. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Julia whispered against his mouth, I choose you, Daniel Lawson. Past and all. That night, they truly became husband and wife, discovering each other with gentle hands and whispered words of reassurance. In the sanctuary of their bedroom, scars both visible and hidden were touched with reverence rather than revulsion, the first step in a deeper healing neither had believed possible. The trouble Jake McCleary brought to Silver Creek erupted 2 weeks later. Word came from town that the bank had been robbed, the sheriff shot. Daniel rode in with a posse, returning grim-faced with news that McCleary's gang had escaped with several $1,000s, but would likely hide in the mountains until the pursuit died down. They'll come here, Daniel told Julia that night. McCleary knows these hills aren't well patrolled. He'll expect me to shelter them for old times' sake. And if you refuse? Daniel's expression hardened. Then they'll try to take what they want by force. For 3 days, the ranch operated under a state of watchful tension. Mike slept in the barn with a rifle, and Daniel taught Julia signals and hiding places should trouble come while he was away from the house. On the 4th night, as a summer storm built on the horizon, Julia woke to the sound of voices below their bedroom window. Daniel was already up, pulling on his trousers, pressing a finger to his lips for silence. He handed her the shotgun and motioned for her to position herself beside the window where she could see but not be seen. 3 riders, she whispered. McCleary and the other 2 from before. Daniel nodded, buckling his gun belt. Stay here. If shooting starts, use the back stairs and get to the root cellar like we planned. Before she could protest, he was gone, moving quietly down the main staircase. Julia positioned herself at the upstairs window, shotgun ready, watching as Daniel stepped onto the porch. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the rain-slicked yard where the 3 men waited on horseback. You're not welcome here, McCleary, Daniel's voice carried in the charged air. That any way to greet an old friend? Jake's laugh was ugly, especially one who knows enough about you to hang you 3 times over. Whatever you did in town, I want no part of it. Jake dismounted, splashing through puddles as he approached the porch. Too late for that, Lawson. Sheriff's dead, and witnesses can place us together in Dodge 5 years back. Your respectable life here is over unless you help us. Thunder rolled overhead as Daniel descended the steps, stopping just out of Jake's reach. I'm not that man anymore. No? The Daniel Lawson I knew wouldn't hide behind a wife and ranch when his friends needed him. He had fire in his blood. Jake spat on the ground. Look at you now. Domesticated. Weak. I call it changed, Daniel replied evenly. Something you wouldn't understand. From her vantage point, Julia saw the younger rider dismount, and circled toward the side of the house. She moved silently to the hallway window to keep him in view. Below, Jake's patience was wearing thin. We need a place to lie low for 2 weeks. Food, shelter, no questions. Then we're gone, and your precious secret stays buried. And if I refuse? Jake's hand moved to his gun. Then we take what we need anyway, and maybe I tell your pretty wife what kind of man she really married. His voice dropped. How many men did you kill in that saloon fire in Wichita, Lawson? 6, 7. Julia's breath caught. She saw Daniel flinch as if struck. It was an accident. Daniel's voice was hollow. I never meant, don't matter what you meant. Those men are still dead. Jake's smile was vicious. Wonder what the good people of Silver Creek would think of their upstanding rancher if they knew. The younger outlaw had reached the side door. Julia moved quickly, descending the back stairs as silently as possible. She emerged in the kitchen just as the door began to open. I wouldn't, she said calmly, the shotgun aimed at the man's chest. He froze, then slowly raised his hands. Easy now, ma'am. No need for that. Back away from the door, Julia ordered. When he complied, she moved forward, keeping the shotgun steady. Now walk. Out the front door where my husband can see you. She marched him through the house and onto the porch where Daniel and Jake stood locked in their standoff. The third outlaw remained mounted, his rifle now trained on Daniel. Seems your wife's got more backbone than you, Lawson. Jake laughed when he saw them emerge. Julia kept her voice steady. My husband said you're not welcome here. I'm inclined to agree. Lightning flashed again, the storm directly overhead now. Rain poured down, drenching the men in the yard. Put down that scattergun, lady, Jake said, his hand hovering near his pistol. This doesn't concern you. My home, my husband. I'd say it concerns me greatly. Julia's eyes never wavered. Whatever Daniel did before he came here doesn't matter to me. The man he is now is the one I married. The man he is now is a lie, Jake snarled. Tell her, Lawson. Tell her how you left those men to burn in Wichita after you started the fire. Tell her how you rode with us for 2 years, robbing and stealing. Daniel's face was pale, but he stepped forward, placing himself between Julia and Jake. I've told her enough for her to know I'm not that man anymore. I've paid for my mistakes. Made amends where I could. Noble words from a coward. Jake drew his pistol in one fluid motion. Last chance, Lawson. We're staying. What happened next unfolded in heartbeats. The mounted outlaw fired, the shot going wide as thunder crashed. Daniel dove for Jake, tackling him into the mud as his gun discharged. Julia swung the shotgun toward the mounted man, firing and hitting his shoulder. He toppled from his horse with a cry. The younger outlaw beside her lunged, but Julia swung the shotgun butt, catching him across the temple. He crumpled to the porch boards. In the yard, Daniel and Jake wrestled in the mud, each fighting for control of Jake's pistol. A shot rang out, and both men went still. Daniel! Julia screamed, rushing down the steps. For one terrible moment, neither man moved. Then Daniel pushed himself up, mud-covered and breathing hard. Jake lay motionless beneath him, blood mixing with rain on his chest. I'm all right, Daniel gasped, staggering to his feet. Check the others. The mounted man was wounded but alive, clutching his bleeding shoulder. The younger outlaw on the porch was unconscious but breathing. Only Jake McCleary, the man who had brought Daniel's past crashing back into their lives, lay dead in the rain-soaked yard. By morning, the sheriff's deputy had arrived with reinforcements. The surviving outlaws were taken into custody, the stolen money recovered from their saddlebags. Daniel gave his statement, omitting nothing about his past associations with the men. By rights, I should arrest you too, the deputy said grimly when Daniel finished his account. By rights, you should, Daniel agreed. I won't deny what I was. Julia stepped forward, her hand finding Daniel's. But that's not who he is now. 5 years of honest living, building this ranch, helping this community. Surely that counts for something. The deputy looked between them, his weathered face revealing nothing. The sheriff always said a man should be judged by his actions, not his words. Your actions last night saved that money from leaving the territory. He straightened. I'll need you both to testify when the circuit judge comes through next month. As for the rest, that's between you and your conscience, Lawson. When the deputy and his men departed with the prisoners and Jake's body, Daniel and Julia stood on the porch, watching the procession until it disappeared down the road. I should have told you everything, Daniel said quietly. About Wichita. About those years after my father left. Julia turned to him, her hands framing his face. Would it have changed who you are today? No. But you deserve to know the truth before you married me. Just as you deserve to know about my scars. Julia asked gently. We all have parts of ourselves we're ashamed to reveal, Daniel. The past shapes us, but it doesn't have to define us. Daniel's arms encircled her waist, drawing her close. When McCleary pulled that gun, all I could think was that I couldn't lose you. That whatever mistakes I've made, loving you isn't one of them. Julia's breath caught. It was the first time either had spoken of love directly, though it had grown between them like a steady flame, warming what had begun as a practical arrangement. I love you too, she whispered, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. And whatever comes next, we face it together. 6 months later, as winter settled over the Montana hills, Daniel and Julia Lawson stood before the judge when he finally reached Silver Creek. The surviving outlaws were sentenced to prison for the bank robbery and the sheriff's murder. When it came time to address Daniel's past involvement with the gang, 36 townsfolk stood to speak on his behalf. Ranchers he had helped during difficult calving seasons, merchants who attested to his honest dealings, the town doctor who recalled how Daniel had ridden 15 miles in a blizzard to bring medicine to a sick child. It appears, the judge said, looking over his spectacles at Daniel, that whatever man you once were, Mr. Lawson, this community has judged you by the man you've become. He struck his gavel. The court sees no reason to pursue charges for ancient history. That night, in the warmth of their bedroom, Daniel held Julia close, his hand resting gently on the slight swell of her belly where their child grew. When I sent for a mail-order bride, I thought I just needed someone to help with the ranch, he murmured against her hair. I never expected to find healing. Julia smiled, tracing the line of his jaw. And I never expected to find a home when I stepped off that train. I just wanted escape. She took his hand and placed it more firmly against her stomach. Instead, we found a future. Outside, snow began to fall, covering the ranch in pristine white. Inside, the scars that had once defined them both faded further into memory, replaced by the life they continued to build together. A life where the past truly ended at the boundaries of their land, and love proved stronger than the hardships of the frontier.